The city was already thick with that late afternoon smog, the kind that looked less like pollution and more like the exhausted sigh of 3 million people all hitting rush hour at once. My name's Arthur. I've been driving this grid for 40 years, first with a yellow cab, now with the smartphone apps. Some folks call me a relic. I call myself an observer. In this job, you see things, you hear things. The partition between your life and theirs is just a thin pane of glass, and sometimes the glass cracks. The notification chirped, "Pick up, 180E 88th Street. Destination, JFK, an airport run." Usually that means peace and quiet. Maybe a tired executive scrolling through spreadsheets, or a couple arguing softly about the packing list. Today was different. I pulled up to a brownstone that looked like it had seen a century of secrets. A young woman stepped out. Not young, maybe late 30s, but she had that desperate, sharp edge of someone whose life hadn't quite settled yet. She wore a tailored black suit that looked expensive but wrinkled, and she was carrying a handbag that was just a little too large for travel, like it held something vital, something she couldn't check in. She opened the rear door, slipped inside, and shut the door with a decisive thud that cut the city noise instantly. She didn't look up. She just stared straight ahead, breathing deeply. "JFK, Terminal 4, I confirmed, pulling away from the curb. Silence. The kind of silence that's louder than traffic. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the streetlights passing overhead, casting strobes of yellow and orange across her face. Her hands were clutching that big handbag like it was a lifeline. It was then, seeing the tremor in her knuckles, that I felt the first little prickle of tension, the familiar rise of adrenaline that tells an old driver, this isn't just a ride. She finally spoke, her voice low, raspy, like gravel had replaced the usual smooth tone. "You drive for Uber, right?" "That's right, ma'am," I replied. "Arthur's the name." "No names," she said quickly, her eyes still fixed forward. "Just, you're a driver. That's all that matters. You hear a lot of things, don't you, Arthur? Things people wouldn't say to their friends, their priest, or their therapists. Things they only tell the stranger driving them to the airport, the one they'll never see again." It wasn't a question. It was a declaration, a preamble. I kept my expression neutral, my hands steady on the wheel. Sometimes, people get reflective when they're traveling. It's the liminal space, I suppose, between where they were and where they're going. She laughed, a short, brittle sound that snapped the comfortable quiet of the car. Liminal space, that's a good word for it. I'm certainly in a liminal space right now. I just crossed a line, Arthur, a line I can't walk back from. The casual formality of her suit, the expensive leather of the bag, the destination, JFK, a ticket out. It all started to weave into something dark and unexpected. The emotional temperature in the back seat had just dropped about 20 degrees. My heart, usually a steady old clock, ticked up a notch. This wasn't a confession about a messy divorce or a lost promotion. "Everyone crosses lines," I offered gently, trying to keep the conversation slow, anchored. "It's how you decide what to do on the other side that counts." She turned her head slowly and finally looked directly at me through the rearview mirror. Her eyes were a stunning shade of blue, but they were swimming in a sea of something cold and absolute. I saw panic, yes, but mostly I saw resolve. The kind of resolve that has nothing left to lose. This line, Arthur, it's not metaphorical, it's final, and I need to talk about it. Not because I'm looking for advice or absolution, but because if I don't say it out loud to someone, anyone, I think I might actually start screaming in this car. And screaming passengers are bad for the rating, aren't they? A flicker of a terrible, desperate humor crossed her face. I kept my voice low. "I've had a few screamers. We'll manage. Take your time, ma'am. We've got at least 40 minutes before we hit the terminal. You don't have to tell me anything, but if you do, I promise it stays right here between the leather seats and the tinted glass." She nodded, accepting the terms of the temporary unspoken contract. The tension in her shoulders lessened marginally, enough for her to reposition the heavy handbag in her lap. She placed one hand protectively over it. "My name is Sarah," she whispered. She broke her own rule, which told me the dam was truly about to burst. "I work in corporate finance, high-stakes mergers, hostile takeovers. I make rich men richer, and I'm very good at it. Or I was very good at it. Until this morning. I waited, keeping the speed steady, focusing on the lane markers. The silence stretched, now a weighted blanket rather than a sharp blade. The crescendo of anxiety in the car was building, not through shouting, but through the sheer weight of what was unspoken. The CEO of the firm I was working on, he was a monster. Not just a difficult boss, Arthur. He was predatory. Financially, emotionally, sometimes worse. He destroyed careers on a whim, ruined families to save a nickel. We all knew it. We all saw it. We all turned a blind eye because the bonus checks were too damn fat to look away from. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping further, pulling me deeper into her circle of confession. This was the shift. The moment the passenger stops treating you like a service provider and starts seeing you as a confessional booth on wheels. 3 weeks ago, he pulled the final trick. A fraudulent deal that would have left 1,000 factory workers without pensions, without severance, just a note telling them their lifetime of work was now an entry on a bankruptcy ledger. It was cold, it was evil, and I was the one who was supposed to sign the final papers, binding us all to the lie. She stopped, a small choked sound escaping her. I could see her chest rising and falling rapidly in the mirror. This was the moment of peak deceleration. The quiet before the next terrifying ascent. The car felt heavy, like we were driving through thick water. "Did you sign the papers, Sarah?" I asked, my voice barely above a rumble, trying to gently lead her back to the narrative track. "No," she said, her voice now a firm, chilling whisper. "I didn't sign the papers. I did something much, much worse. Something that changes my destination from JFK to, I don't know, exile, or maybe prison." She took another deep, shuddering breath, her fingers tightening on the expensive leather of the bag, the tension now electric, pressing against the windows. "This morning, Arthur," she said, her eyes boring into mine in the mirror, demanding I witness her terrible secret. "This morning, I drove to his apartment at 6 a.m. I got him to open the door, and I didn't leave until I was sure he wasn't going to harm anyone ever again. I felt a cold shock travel up my spine. My grip on the wheel instinctively tightened. The city outside, so loud and sprawling a moment ago, suddenly seemed miles away. The silence returned, this time filled with the deafening sound of an ultimate, terrible revelation. She had said it. She had just confessed to a murder. The narrative tension had reached its first major peak. I could feel the adrenaline rushing through my veins, but I had to remain the steady old driver, the man who hears the secrets and keeps them safe. "And what?" I asked, my voice calm, flat, cutting through the sudden icy air in the car. "What exactly is in the bag, Sarah?" She didn't hesitate. She looked down at the large, heavy handbag, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips, the smile of someone who has just paid the ultimate price for justice. "Everything," she replied. "Everything I need to disappear. And one thing, one very important thing, that proves everything." The weight of her words settled heavily in the car, leaving us suspended somewhere between the last exit and the airport turnoff, between confession and consequence. The air in the car had grown impossibly heavy, suffocating. The confession hung between us, solid and chilling, vibrating with the untold story of what happened in that apartment at dawn. A murder, a corporate monster silenced. I maintained my speed, refusing to let the shock on my face translate into erratic driving. My role wasn't judge or jury. It was just Arthur, the steady old driver, the recipient of a terrible, fleeting trust. "The police aren't involved yet," Sarah stated, answering the question I hadn't dared to ask. Her voice was steadier now, stripped of the initial panic, replaced by a cold, frightening clarity. "He wasn't scheduled for any calls until 10 a.m. By the time they find him, I'll be airborne. Somewhere warm, somewhere they don't look first." "You sound very sure of your plan," I remarked, keeping my tone non-committal, a simple observation. "I am," she replied, her eyes briefly meeting mine in the mirror again, a flash of blue ice. "My job was strategy, merger strategy, hostile takeover strategy. This was just the ultimate hostile takeover. I planned it meticulously. The timing, the alibis, the exit route." She paused, then slowly, deliberately, she rested her hand on the zipper of the large handbag in her lap. And the proof. I didn't need to press her. The confession was building its own momentum. accelerating now as we merged onto the main highway toward the airport terminals. The need to externalize her actions, to validate them to an anonymous ear, was overwhelming her. It was a pressure cooker building to the next emotional peak. "You asked what's in the bag," she continued, her voice low, conspiratorial. "It contains two things that matter. The first is cash, enough to last until I can start building a new life. Untraceable, of course. The second—" She hesitated, pulling the bag closer, her grip so tight her knuckles were white. This was the moment of revelation, the emotional crescendo that gives context and gravity to the initial shock. "The second is his laptop. Not the corporate one, which is locked down tighter than Fort Knox, but his personal one. The one he kept his real secrets on. The one that proves everything he did. The pension fraud, the insider trading, the cover-ups of, shall we say, personal misconduct. The hard drive is encrypted, but I know the key. I was his most trusted associate, Arthur. I had access to all his dark places." I let out a slow, silent breath. It wasn't just revenge. It was an execution of justice, wrapped in a planned escape. The act was monstrous, yes, but the motive, to expose a deeper corruption, added a chilling layer of principle to the horror. "So, you're not just running from a crime," I said, translating the subtext of her actions. "You're running with the evidence." "Exactly," she confirmed, a fierce pride in her voice. If I had just gone to the authorities, the firm's lawyers would have buried me in paperwork and ruined my life long before I could bring him down. He would have used his power to spin the narrative, and those 1,000 factory workers would still lose everything. The system is built to protect men like him. I had to break the system. "And the killing, was that part of the original plan?" I asked, the question hanging like smoke. I felt compelled to understand the exact moment the line was crossed. She was quiet for a long time. The highway stretched before us, a ribbon of asphalt leading straight toward her freedom, or her reckoning. The emotional rhythm of the story needed to slow here, to deepen the impact of her ultimate choice. "No," she finally whispered, her voice cracking for the first time since the confession began. It was the sound of regret, of the final loss of innocence. "The plan was simple. Get the laptop, copy the key financial data, disappear, and anonymously leak the information to the SEC and the press. Ruin him financially, professionally. Exile him, not kill him." She closed her eyes briefly, the image of that morning undoubtedly playing behind her lids. But when I got there, he was drinking, celebrating. He was gloating about the deal, how he was untouchable, how everyone was too weak to stop him. He looked at me, "Arthur," and he said— She trailed off, swallowing hard, fighting to regain her composure. This was the trigger, the moment the growing pressure exploded. He said, "You're just like the rest of them, Sarah. You'll take your bonus and look the other way because you're a coward." And then he laughed. That condescending, cruel sound that had haunted every meeting, every late night. I saw those 1,000 faces flash in my mind, Arthur, the workers who would lose their homes. And I realized that financial ruin wasn't enough. He was a cancer. You don't exile cancer, you eradicate it. Her breath hitched. It was quick, unexpected, for both of us. A moment of pure, uncontrolled, necessary rage. The admission of rage, of the visceral human element, brought the tension to a boiling point again. The narrative was accelerating wildly now, rushing toward the final decision point of her flight. She was justifying the means by the magnitude of the end. "And the laptop," I prompted softly, bringing the focus back to the evidence, the key to the entire operation. "Why bring it with you? Why not leave it for the police to find and expose him post-mortem?" She shook her head, a slow, determined movement. "Because if I leave it, his people, his top lawyers, his fixers, they will find it first. They will destroy it, erase the files, spin a narrative that he was the victim of a disgruntled employee who went insane. My death would be meaningless. The laptop is my insurance policy. It guarantees that his name, his actions, and his firm will be destroyed, even if I am caught." The car was silent again, but the silence was now a container for the vast, impossible weight of her choice. She had committed a terrible crime, but she carried the proof of a greater one. A moral equation that didn't balance. We passed the sign for the airport loop. The familiar chaos of terminals and car rental lots began to appear. We were nearly there. Her escape was imminent. "So, what do you plan to do with the laptop now?" I asked, looking in the mirror. She was calmer, resolute. The confession was complete. All that remained was the execution of her plan. She gently patted the bag. "I'm going to disappear, Arthur, but I'm not going to keep this silent forever. I need to be safe first. Then I'm going to make sure the evidence gets out. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but it will get out. And when it does, the truth will hit the city like a bomb. I just need one last act of faith in a world full of lies." She sighed, a genuine, deep release of tension. The destination was in sight. The emotional arc was slowing again, settling into the quiet contemplation of consequence. "I need you to pull up to the international departures curb," she instructed, her voice completely professional again, the CEO of her own exit strategy. "And then, Arthur, you forget you ever saw me." The terminal ramp curved up, leading her to the point of no return. The final approach to Terminal 4 was a slow-motion study in human anxiety. The hurried goodbyes, the luggage carts clattering, the constant aggressive horn blasts of drivers trying to maneuver away from the curb. But inside my car, it was dead silent, save for the low hum of the engine. Sarah, the passenger, was preparing for her grand exit. She had confessed to an execution and revealed her possession of the ultimate leverage. Now, all that remained was the goodbye. I pulled into the designated drop-off zone, right next to the doors for international check-in. The air outside was thick with jet fuel and exhaust. "This is it, Arthur," she said, finally turning to face the side window, looking out at the chaotic scene of departures. The resolution in her eyes hadn't wavered, but a deep, profound sorrow was starting to bleed into the blue. She was facing the vast, cold reality of her choice. This was the moment of quiet descent, the emotional gravity pulling her toward the consequences. "You have a ticket, a passport, and a plan," I stated simply, turning to look at her fully now. The old driver needed to make eye contact with the person who had just entrusted him with the most terrifying secret of his career. "That's all you need right now." She reached into the pocket of her tailored jacket and pulled out a thick wad of bills, far more than the ride was worth. She pressed the money into my hand. My fingers closed around the paper, warm from her palm. "This isn't a tip, Arthur. This is thank you money. For listening and for knowing." She paused, her voice taking on a strangely official, almost legal tone. "You understand the stakes. You've heard the truth. If you say anything now, you become part of the story. And frankly, the lawyers for his firm would destroy you trying to protect their reputation. Don't be a hero, Arthur. You're an observer. Observe and let it go." The warning was sharp, clear, and utterly pragmatic. She was trying to protect her secret, yes, but perhaps trying to protect me too, from the whirlwind that was about to hit the city. I looked at the money, then back at her. "I've been driving too long to get involved in other people's dramas, Sarah. I just follow the directions on the screen, and the screen says, 'Drop off at JFK.' I made sure my tone conveyed a neutral, almost bored acceptance of the status quo. It was the only reassurance I could offer. She nodded, accepting my tacit agreement to silence. She reached for the door handle, but then she hesitated. Her hand froze, hovering over the cold metal. This was the sudden, unexpected stop in the rhythm, the emotional spike of doubt hitting her just as the finish line was in sight. "There's something else," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the car idling. "The doubt. It's hitting me, Arthur. Not the doubt about him. He deserved what he got. But the doubt about me. What kind of person leaves their entire life behind and carries a secret like this? Am I a vigilante or am I just a killer?" It was a raw, devastating question, the core of her internal conflict. It was the moment she stopped being the calculating strategist and became the terrified human being. "I can't answer that for you, Sarah," I replied, my voice gentle but firm. "I only know what you told me. You did a terrible thing to stop a greater one. And now you have the proof, the laptop. That proof is what holds your moral standing, not the act itself. If you keep the evidence safe, if you ensure the truth gets out, then maybe, just maybe, you stand for something more than what happened in that apartment. She looked at the handbag, that heavy, vital container of evidence and cash, then back at me. A deep, complex emotion crossed her face: relief, fear, and an agonizing self-loathing. "It's too heavy," she said suddenly, unexpectedly. "The laptop. This whole thing is too heavy. I can't carry it for the rest of my life." The tension rose again. Was she going to abandon the evidence, ruin her own sacrifice? The whole narrative pivot was contained in that one heavy leather bag. "The laptop is the only thing that separates you from a common criminal, Sarah," I insisted, the old driver suddenly finding his voice of counsel. "It's your cross, yes, but it's also your shield. It ensures his crimes are remembered, not just your act. You need to keep it." "But what if I lose it? What if I'm caught at the border and they take it? Then they have me and his secret dies with me," she argued, the panic accelerating again. She opened the car door, the noise of the terminal rushing in. She was halfway out of the car, one foot on the curb, the other still inside. She was literally straddling two worlds, her old life and her exile. Then, in a frantic, decisive motion, she looked down at the bag, and instead of taking it with her, she hesitated. Then she slid it forward onto the floor of the passenger side, the front passenger side, where the seat was empty. "No," she breathed, her eyes wide, locked on the bag. "I can't risk it. If I take it and they stop me, I'm just a killer with a bag full of evidence they'll destroy. If I leave it..." She looked back at me, a wild, desperate plea in her eyes. The emotional climax of this entire scene was not her confession, but this sudden, terrifying act of trust. "Arthur, please, you're my only witness. You're anonymous, you're invisible. Take the laptop, keep it safe. Don't look at it, don't touch it, don't tell anyone about it. Just take it somewhere safe. And if I can't reach you in 2 weeks, if I go dark, if I'm arrested, or if something happens to me," her voice was raw with urgency, "then you release it. You get this thing into the hands of a reputable journalist, someone who isn't afraid of the big firms. You publish the data. Make sure he's exposed, no matter what happens to me." She was thrusting the final, terrifying burden onto my lap. Me, Arthur, the old anonymous Uber driver, the one who just wanted to get home and have a cup of tea. I stared at the bag, now resting innocently at my feet. The weight of her secret had just quadrupled. "You're asking me to hold evidence of a murder, Sarah," I said, the words heavy and metallic in my mouth. "And the key to destroying one of the biggest firms in the city." She leaned in, her face close to mine, her eyes blazing with a frightening intensity. "I'm asking you to perform one last act of service for a passenger, Arthur. To be the good man you sound like, to make sure my terrible act wasn't entirely in vain." And then, before I could fully process the gravity of the leather bag sitting on my floor mat, she stepped out of the car. She closed the door firmly, definitively. She didn't look back. She walked swiftly, purposefully toward the terminal doors, disappearing into the churning stream of travelers, a woman now defined entirely by her desperate flight and the evidence she had left behind. I sat there frozen, the engine idling, the traffic stacking up behind me, the cold, heavy realization sinking in. I was no longer just an observer. I was now the guardian of a confession, a key piece of evidence, and a promise made to a killer in the moments before her exile. The rhythm of my life had just been violently accelerated. I put the car in park, feeling the ridiculous absurdity of the moment. The laptop, the confession, the cash, and the terrible binding promise. What in God's name was I supposed to do now? The horn started blaring immediately. I was parked illegally, idling at the international curb, paralyzed by a leather bag and a terrifying oath. A security officer, a young man with a headset and too much caffeine, tapped sharply on my window. I snapped back to reality, pulling the car into gear. "Sorry, officer," I muttered, easing out into the stream of traffic. My heart was still pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The city suddenly felt less like a home and more like a vast, cold hunting ground. I had just driven away from a murder scene, leaving the perpetrator to fly free, and I was now complicit. A simple Uber driver, turned reluctant accomplice and custodian of explosive evidence. I drove slowly, mechanically, leaving the airport's frantic energy behind. I avoided looking at the front passenger floor, where the laptop bag sat like a ticking emotional bomb. The cash she'd given me, a thick, ugly pile of $100 bills, was still warm in my hand. I pulled off the main highway a few miles out, finding a quiet, dimly lit side street near a closed warehouse district. I had to stop. I had to think. I shut off the engine. The resulting silence was absolute, a heavy contrast to the roar of the city we had just left. I leaned my head back against the seat, feeling the familiar ache of 70-plus years suddenly settling into my bones. What in God's name have you done, Arthur? The dilemma was a three-pronged hook digging into my conscience. First, there was the crime. Sarah was a killer. I was shielding a murderer, giving her the head start she needed to escape justice. Every moral fiber in my being, the law-abiding life I had lived, screamed at me to call the police, to report the confession, to hand over the bag. Second, there was the corruption. The evidence in that bag proved a massive, deliberate financial fraud that would ruin hundreds of working-class families. If I handed the bag to the police now, her powerful firm would immediately leverage their contacts. They would argue the laptop was planted, that it was a fabrication by a mentally unstable killer. The evidence would be seized, buried, and ultimately dismissed. The CEO's crimes would die with him, and Sarah's terrible sacrifice would be in vain. Third, there was the promise. I was an old man, Arthur. My word was one of the few things I still possessed with certainty. I had given her my implicit promise. I promise it stays right here. And then, by taking custody of the evidence, I had sealed that commitment. A commitment to an anonymous, desperate woman who, in her final moment of doubt, chose to trust an invisible stranger to deliver justice. I reached down slowly, my fingers brushing the cool, expensive leather of the bag. It felt heavier now, weighted with lives, lies, and death. I pulled it onto the seat beside me. I didn't open it. I knew what was inside. A silver laptop, heavy with secrets, and the bulk of the cash. I had to look at this pragmatically, through the lens of a long life watching the world burn and occasionally watching a hero light a small fire against the darkness. If I called the police, I'd be tied up for weeks, months, possibly years. My life would be ruined, my anonymity shattered, and worse, the justice Sarah had risked everything for would be nullified. The powerful would win again. If I kept the promise, I was protecting a killer, yes, but I was also protecting the truth, a truth that could hold accountable the real systemic evil Sarah had identified. It was a choice between two moral wrongs, or perhaps a terrible wrong for a greater right. The narrative rhythm was accelerating again, fueled by the ethical crisis roaring in my head. I picked up my old smartphone, the one I used for the app. I wanted to search for the CEO's name, for any sign of a breaking news story, but I hesitated. Any search I made, any call I placed, would leave a digital footprint, linking Arthur the driver directly to the confession and the crime. Sarah's warning echoed in my mind. Don't be a hero, Arthur. I couldn't risk the evidence. I put the phone down. The priority was the laptop. I had to secure it. I had to honor the 2-week window she'd requested. I started the engine and drove out of the deserted warehouse district. I wasn't heading home. Home was too obvious, too easily compromised. I needed a hiding spot, a place nobody would think to look, a location that reflected the anonymity of the one who entrusted me. I drove toward the heart of the city, not toward the affluent uptown, but toward the dense, unremarkable downtown district, a maze of offices, post offices, and automated storage facilities. The narrative slowed to a quiet, determined pulse. I was moving from panicked reaction to methodical action. My old cabbie instincts kicked in. I thought about the thousands of drop-offs, the brief, disposable moments of trust. I remembered the anonymous nature of a public storage locker, a small climate-controlled box that swallowed secrets and held them in the darkness. I found a 24-hour access facility half an hour later. The process was cold, automated, and beautifully impersonal. I paid for a small 2-by-2-foot locker for 6 months using the cash Sarah gave me. The money laundering had begun. I used a fake name, an old alias from my cab days, and a burner email address. No credit card, no personal ID. In the dead quiet of the facility's brightly lit corridor, I transferred the laptop from the expensive bag into a generic, unmarked plastic storage box I bought from a vending machine. I left the large leather handbag inside the locker too, a final gesture of severing the evidence from its origin. I locked the unit with the heavy, satisfying clack of the steel bolt. The key, a simple plastic card, now rested in my wallet, next to my driver's license. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the cold, numbered door. Locker 409. Inside rested the key to financial ruin and the evidence of a murder. My part in the story was now irrevocably written. I was no longer an observer. I was a custodian of a terrible truth. I had chosen to trust the principle of the killer over the process of the law. The tension, the weight of the moral decision, had peaked and now settled into a low, terrifying hum of commitment. I got back into my empty Uber, the ghost of Sarah's presence still chilling the back seat. I pulled out of the lot and merged back into the late-night traffic. The timer had officially started. 2 weeks. If I didn't hear from her, I had a job to do. The thought terrified me, but it also, in a strange, unsettling way, gave my otherwise mundane life a sudden, powerful sense of purpose. The 2 weeks that followed the drop-off at JFK were the longest, most surreal period of my 40 years on the road. The city outside my windshield looked the same, the neon signs, the hurried faces, the endless, relentless rhythm of traffic, but everything felt filtered through a layer of dread. I was living a double life. Arthur, the routine Uber driver by day. Arthur, the reluctant guardian of high-stakes corporate secrets and murder evidence by night. The emotional tension of the narrative had slowed to a torturous, slow burn. I resumed my usual routes, but my concentration was shattered. Every police siren, every sudden stop, every sharp knock on the window sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. I kept expecting to see a detective flashing a badge, asking about a tailored black suit and a large leather handbag. For the first 3 days, I compulsively checked the news, not on my working phone, but on an old tablet I kept hidden in the back of my closet. I searched every local news outlet, every financial blog, every mention of high-profile executives. Nothing. The CEO's silence was absolute, protected by his schedule and the closed doors of his affluent apartment. The system was exactly as Sarah had predicted, slow, deliberate, and designed to cover up the absence of its high-ranking players until it was too late. The lack of news was a strange kind of pressure, worse than breaking headlines. It meant the clock was ticking, not just for the 2 weeks, but for Sarah's eventual exposure. On the 4th day, a small, subtle article appeared in the back pages of the business section. A brief, vague item mentioning that Mr. CEO's name redacted was unexpectedly unavailable for a crucial signing, citing a sudden, severe illness. His firm had released a bland statement about prioritizing his recovery and delaying the merger vote. It was the first ripple. They were covering for him, buying time, trying to control the narrative of his absence. The emotional pitch rose slightly, a confirmation that the firm was operating in the dark, just as Sarah intended. I started driving different routes, varying my schedule. I stopped taking long rides that would keep me out of my small apartment for too long. I needed to be close to the key, the one thing that connected me to Locker 409. I slept poorly, the image of Sarah's desperate blue eyes in the rearview mirror haunting my few hours of rest. Was she safe? Was she watching the news, waiting for the leak? Or was she already detained, or worse? I thought often about the money she had given me. I hadn't spent a cent, aside from the storage locker fee. It sat hidden in a shoebox, an ugly, criminal weight. It felt like blood money, a physical manifestation of my involvement. I found myself wishing I had left it with her. The moral calculus became my constant silent passenger. I had protected a secret to expose a greater crime. But what if she was lying? What if the laptop contained nothing but personal files, and her entire narrative was a desperate attempt to frame the man she had simply murdered in a moment of professional pique? The seeds of doubt began to sprout, accelerating my internal anxiety. I had to operate on faith in the terror in her voice, faith in the chilling resolve in her eyes. Midway through the second week on day 10th, the atmosphere in the city shifted perceptibly. The sudden illness story began to unravel. A more prominent article appeared, suggesting the CEO's absence was now being investigated internally as a matter of significant concern. The merger vote was postponed indefinitely. Reporters were circling his apartment building. The pressure was building on the firm. This was the steady increase in tension I had anticipated, the consequence of Sarah's action rippling outward. On day 12, I received a text message. It wasn't from a recognized number. It was just a single, non-committal line of text. The clock is still running. Do nothing. My hands shook as I read the message. It was her. It had to be. Nobody else knew about the clock. The emotional spike was sharp and brief. Relief mixed with paralyzing fear. Relief that she was alive and free enough to send a message. Fear that she was communicating with me, further entangling me in her digital net. I immediately deleted the message and turned off the phone, removing the SIM card and crushing it. I needed to be a ghost. Her message confirmed she was still active, still in control of her escape, and still relying on me to be the silent sentinel. The 2-week deadline was arbitrary. The real deadline was her safety. Do nothing. I settled back into the routine of waiting. The message had bought me time, but it hadn't removed the burden. The narrative rhythm slowed again, settling into the quiet dread of the ongoing stalemate. On the afternoon of day 14th, the original deadline, I was driving near the Upper East Side when I saw it. A flurry of police activity around the brownstone where I had picked her up. Yellow tape, squad cars, and a crowd of gawkers held back by uniformed officers. The police had finally been called in. The charade of the sudden illness, finally over. The body had been found. The ultimate consequence of her act had finally landed in the heart of the city. The emotional climax of the 2-week watch had arrived. The truth was out, but only the truth of the murder. The truth of the corporate crime was still safely locked away in locker 409. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The temptation to call in the tip, to send an anonymous link to the laptop's location, was overwhelming. But I remembered her last command: do nothing. The police were only starting the investigation. If I exposed the laptop now, it would be instantly linked to the discovered body, and I would be their primary material witness, or worse, a suspect. I had to wait for her signal, or for the confirmation that she was truly gone. I drove past the scene, keeping my head forward, a ghost in the machine. The 2 weeks were over, but the waiting was not. I was still bound by her desperate act of trust. The investigation into the CEO's death became a media circus overnight. The news was dominated by headlines of a mystery homicide, theories ranging from a rival executive to a botched robbery. Sarah's firm went into lockdown, lawyers issuing icy non-committal statements, desperately trying to protect their stock price and their reputation. The emotional chaos of the city was at its peak, and I, Arthur, the man with the key, was the only one who held the answer. I had successfully navigated the first major hurdle, the 2-week waiting period. Now, the final, terrifying move was up to me. I never heard from Sarah again after that single cryptic text message. The silence that followed the discovery of the body was heavy and absolute. I watched the news cycle for 3 more days, the narrative slowing into the tedious, repetitive rhythm of an unresolved case. The police were hunting for an unknown killer. The firm was tightening its defenses, and the laptop in locker 409 was getting heavier by the hour. On the 3rd day after the body was found, day 17 since the drop-off, I made the decision. Sarah's silence had become a message in itself. She was either caught, compromised, or had successfully disappeared, and realized that contacting me further would only endanger the evidence. My duty now was clear. I had to fulfill the second part of her promise. I had to ensure her terrible act was redeemed by the truth it unleashed. The weight of the moral burden, the ethical accelerating force, had reached its peak. It was time to act. I decided against calling a general newspaper, as Sarah feared corporate power could easily muzzle or discredit a major outlet. I needed a shark, someone fearless, someone who operated outside the corporate media machine. I spent an hour researching independent investigative journalists, the kind who chased financial corruption and were known for their stubborn refusal to be intimidated. I found one, Lena Petrova. She ran a small, fiercely independent digital publication that specialized in exposing white-collar crime. She had a reputation for anonymity and for being ruthless with powerful targets. She was the perfect recipient for Sarah's explosive legacy. I drove back to the automated storage facility in the dead of night. The fluorescent lights of the corridor hummed, illuminating the cold steel of the lockers. I retrieved the plastic box containing the silver laptop. My hands were steady, my movements methodical. The fear had been replaced by a grim, focused determination. I was an old driver fulfilling a final, critical delivery. Next, I found a public park with an old payphone booth, a true relic of the analog past, the perfect tool for an anonymous delivery. I put on a pair of thin latex gloves I kept in my glove compartment, a final, necessary precaution. I was careful not to leave fingerprints, treating the laptop like the dangerous ordnance it was. I called Lena Petrova's office number, which I'd found listed on her website, from the payphone. "Lena Petrova," a guarded voice answered after 2 rings. "Ms. Petrova," I said, keeping my voice low, flat, and deliberately disguised by speaking into my shirt. "I have the truth about the recent death of the CEO from firm name redacted, and the reason." There was a sudden, sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Who is this? How do you know?" "I am anonymous," I cut her off. "I am the holder of the key, and I have the evidence. The full financial records, the internal memos, the evidence of the pension fraud, all of it. On his personal laptop, it's encrypted, but I can provide the key." "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice now sharp with journalistic urgency. "This is a trap, isn't it?" "It is not a trap," I insisted. "It is a delivery. The laptop will be placed in a standard brown paper bag secured with tape. You will find it in the public trash receptacle at the corner of 57th and 6th by the bookstore within the next 30 minutes. I will place it there, and I will be gone. The encryption key is, I state the key, a complex string of letters and numbers I memorized. You have 30 minutes to retrieve it before the city sanitation clears the bin." I delivered the instructions in one breath, giving her no chance to interrupt or question. The narrative was moving at a fast, decisive clip. This was the rapid, controlled acceleration toward the final release. "Wait, tell me why you're doing this," she shouted into the receiver. I paused, looking out at the dark, indifferent city. "Because the passenger asked me to," I replied, the truth simple and profound. "And because the system should not be built to protect monsters. Justice needs a driver too, Ms. Petrova." I hung up the phone abruptly, breaking the final link. The delivery was swift and clinical. I taped the key onto a small piece of paper and taped that to the laptop. I placed the whole package securely into the brown paper bag. I drove to 57th and 6th, a busy intersection even this late. I parked a block away, walked quickly to the receptacle, and dropped the heavy bag onto a pile of discarded coffee cups. I didn't look back. The moment of release was complete. I walked back to my car, got in, and drove home. I didn't turn on the radio or the television. I didn't need to. I knew what would happen next. Lena Petrova was a professional. She would get the laptop, she would decrypt the files, and the truth, delayed by a murder, protected by an anonymous driver, would finally explode into the public sphere. The next morning it was exactly as I predicted. The headlines were not about the murder anymore. They were about the absolute financial devastation of the CEO's firm. Petrova's story was a masterpiece. Raw data, damning memos, irrefutable proof of the pension fraud, and years of insider trading. The firm's stock plummeted to zero within hours. The SEC froze all assets. The 1,000 factory workers were saved, their story woven into the narrative of corporate accountability. The murder, in the face of such massive financial crime, receded into the background, contextualized as a desperate final act of vigilance. Sarah, the killer, was transformed in the public eye, from a murderer to a tragic figure of corporate retaliation. Her act viewed not as a crime of passion, but as a last, desperate bid for justice. The moral equation had finally tipped. I drove my shift that day, the car feeling lighter than it had in weeks. I was still Arthur, the old driver, But I was also the ghost in the system, the invisible hand that delivered the truth. The city was in chaos, but my conscience was, for the first time, clear. I'd fulfilled my promise to a desperate passenger. I had been the anonymous driver of justice. I looked at the rearview mirror, but the blue eyes weren't there anymore. Just the reflection of an old man ready for his next pickup.